Hello and welcome to our podcast about Holocaust education and memory politics. My name is Janine Wurz and I am a PhD candidate at the University of Victoria. I am working on Holocaust education, on memory politics, and on teacher education. So I'm going to tell you in this podcast a little bit about what I have learned about what is Holocaust education, how Holocaust education and politics are interlinked, and we will talk about different approaches towards Holocaust education. I'm very happy because in this podcast I was able to talk to two professors at the University of Victoria. One is Helga Thorsen from the Department of Germanic and Slavic Studies, who is teaching the Holocaust for many years, and Kristen Simmons, who is also an expert on the Holocaust, teaching at UVic's History Department. So let's begin with the question of what is Holocaust education? The Holocaust is a very specific term that is used to describe the suffering and murder of the Jews by Nazi Germany and its allies. There is other terms to describe this, especially Shoah is used quite often. However, Holocaust education is a quite widely understood term that includes a very broad field of research and policies, and that is why I use it here as well. Even though there's good arguments to use Shoah education or teaching and learning about the Holocaust as other terms. So it is important to understand that Holocaust education is not only about a specific geographical region. We are not speaking only about Germany, and we are not speaking only about death camps as Auschwitz, which is the most renowned death and concentration camp in the world and symbolizes for many people the Holocaust. So one thing is that it's very important to recognize that the Holocaust took place in all over Europe, where Jewish people got deported and murdered, and many atrocities were committed towards different groups. So that is one thing. The other thing is that it's important to remember that the Holocaust did not only take place in concentration and death camps, but also very much by mass shootings, something that happened mainly in Eastern Germany, in today's Poland or today's Ukraine, where we are talking about the so-called Holocaust by bullets, where the so-called Einsatzgruppen, so specialized SS groups, were shooting thousands and thousands of Jewish people at once. Coming back from what we are even talking about historically, it is of course also important to discuss in Holocaust education how it was possible that these things happened. How was it possible that neighbors told on their neighbors, that people looked away when their work colleagues were deported, that people cheered when Jewish people were beaten up on the streets? So there is a lot of discussion that we need to have around what comes before the murder of a whole people. And that is how is a society developing that individuals are accepting, are participating in these terrible crimes. And of course, in that case, we have to talk a lot about ideology. We have to talk about hate. We have to talk about anti-Semitism. And we also have to talk about how these ideologies are still present today. And that is, of course, a very important discussion with students, and that is how can we deal with racism, with anti-Semitism, with hate in our immediate environment in today's society, and how can we all participate in a world that wants to make sure that something like the Holocaust cannot happen again. So when we are talking about Holocaust education, we are talking about a very wide field of content. So we're talking about historical content, we're talking about discussions about political ideologies, political ideas. We're talking about society and how societies are formed and how democracy is formed, or how authoritarian regimes and dictatorships are formed. And of course, we are talking about learnings from history, and we are talking about how we want to create our world today and how we want to create our future. So that's quite a lot for Holocaust education. And you can already imagine that this wide field of topics that kind of fall under this umbrella term also means that there is no one clear definition. It is a collection of practices. It is a lot of different things, of principles, of beliefs, of resolutions that are kind of put together under this framework of Holocaust education. And that is on the one hand very helpful because it allows us to discuss many, many topics with that in mind. And it is also a bit tricky because it requires us to make sure that the topics we're discussing are kind of still fitting in that framework. And we have to renegotiate the boundaries of this framework constantly. So what do we want from Holocaust education? So what's the idea of this? And that is something I asked Helga Thorsen. And Helga is a professor in Germanic and Slavic studies at UVic. And she has been teaching Holocaust studies courses for many years, and is someone who has proven to have very innovative methods of teaching and learning and involving students in different forms of project-based and place-based learning. So I asked Helga what she thinks we can achieve with Holocaust education, and that is her answer.
In my view, Holocaust education is an important platform for addressing anti-Semitism and other forms of hatred, and it exposes the dangers of dehumanization and discrimination. In a world filled with propaganda and disinformation that threaten democracies around the world, Holocaust education can serve to make students more aware of the information they come across on social media, and to think about it critically and with human empathy as they navigate becoming the future leaders of tomorrow.
Let's talk about how Holocaust education and politics are linked. Quite often when there are hate crimes or we find a growth of anti-Semitism or racism, we find politicians calling for more or better Holocaust education. However, quite often that stops at a call for action, and it's not clear what actually should happen afterwards and how people should educate about the Holocaust. However, what we can see is that Holocaust education is very much embedded in memory politics, and that is both at a national and a transnational level. What does that mean? It means that how countries remember the Holocaust and remember their own roles and their own past during that time is very much linked to the present. So there's kind of a negotiation between the past and the present going on, which means that this is about coming to terms with one past, but it's also about selecting specific elements of the past or leaving out others. And of course, this differs a lot by countries. So in Germany, as a perpetrator country, the discussion on their own responsibility for National Socialist crimes is way more present in political discourse as this is in the US or in Canada as part of the Allied forces, or as it would be in some Eastern European countries like in Hungary, where the own role during the Holocaust is quite often not discussed so much, or rather left out, while other points in the past are discussed much more in today's politics. So, how we talk about the Holocaust and how we talk about the past falls under this term of memory politics. And memory politics, of course, define our today and how we talk about the past and what we learn from it from the present. So how we teach about the Holocaust, if it is included in our curricula, if it is included in our classes, what is taught, what is left out, and how it is taught is all part of a political discourse. And this political discourse is not only abstract, it is very much about national and transnational identity formation. So who or what does a country want to be? What is the self-understanding of a transnational union like the European Union? And with that, of course, we can see that there has been a lot of activity at a transnational level to collaboratively commemorate the Holocaust since about the 1990s, with founding new organizations like the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance or the European Holocaust Research Infrastructure, with including Holocaust education in the social development goals, or creating an International Holocaust Remembrance Day on January 27th, the day of the liberation of Auschwitz. We can see that the memorization of the Holocaust and education about it is one of today's political key issues, and it's closely tied off to national and transnational understandings of ethics and morals. And for example, for the European identity, as well as for some national identities, a defining building block. When politicians call for never again, they often do that because of a spike of anti-Semitism or hate crimes. This is something that we could observe, for example, during the COVID-19 protests in the past years, where numerous anti-Semitic symbols and slogans, including Stars of David, have been used by protesters. Another call for never again and another call for Holocaust education could be observed quite recently after the terror attacks of Hamas on the Israeli population on October 7th, we could observe a spike in anti-Semitic hate all over Canada. And following that, we could observe several politicians making this call for actions and call for never again, without a clear explanation what that means and how to teach that and who will teach that and in what form. However, one outcome of this in British Columbia was that there will be a Holocaust education mandate starting next fall. Many countries do have a Holocaust education mandate, which means that a certain part of the curriculum is dedicated to learning about the Holocaust or learning from the Holocaust in a specific year of school. In British Columbia and also some other Canadian provinces, this was not the case so far, which meant that some students would have teachers who have a personal interest or maybe a family background that inspired them to teach about the Holocaust in their classes. However, there would also have been a number of students who could go through school and never learn about it. And the same is true for teacher education programs. There might be students in a teacher education program who are very interested and choose to do electives or projects around teaching about the Holocaust. But in these cases, it's also possible that a teacher starts their career without ever learning about the Holocaust and about how to teach the Holocaust before. So let's talk a bit about this new teacher education. I have talked about the new Holocaust education mandate in the BC curriculum with Kristen Simmons, who is a professor of history at the University of Victoria and teaches about the history of the Holocaust.
So I was quite gratified to learn that the BC government is now considering, or I guess has decided, to make Holocaust education mandatory as part of the curriculum for grade 10 students in BC. I think that's been a long time coming because it's been very possible for students to complete their education in the BC school system without any formal education on the Holocaust. It's been so dependent on individual teachers' interests. And of course, as someone who studies this for a living, but also as someone who does a lot of school talks, I think the gap in students' education on these types of topics related to the Holocaust has been really clear to me. And I think this new mandate will go some way towards rectifying that. My biggest fear is what type of training these teachers are going to be given or required to have to suddenly address topics like the Holocaust. And I feel that it is placing an additional burden on teachers to teach something that is enormous and challenging and difficult without those kinds of tools. And so I'm very curious to see what kind of overtures the BC government will make in terms of getting advice from people who do this in their professional lives, so that we hopefully can assist high school teachers in bringing this important part of the curriculum to grade 10 students.
So how teachers are prepared to teach about the Holocaust makes all the difference. It makes a difference in what to teach, but also a difference in how they teach. So in the second part of the podcast, I want to talk a little bit more about different approaches and methodologies towards learning about and from the Holocaust that is more innovative than learning numbers and years and reading a textbook. A a general thing is, I think it's very important to reflect in teaching, but also reflect in working with students on where our knowledge and understanding of remembering the Holocaust is coming from. And that is very interlinked with national identity and memory politics. So there should always be space for like questioning one's own understanding of history, looking for blind spots, and thinking about what is funded, what is represented, and maybe also what is left out. The second thing I think that is very important is to make sure we are talking also about the ideologies that are behind the Holocaust, as anti-Semitism, as hate, as racism, as sexism, and not take it as a given that these ideologies existed and exist until this day. Another important point is to look around where we are and to see how the Holocaust has affected our immediate environment. So the communities where we are living, the provinces where we are living, and to see that the effects of the Holocaust, even though it is many decades later, are still present in the world around us, and to involve that in teaching and learning by talking to local initiatives, talking to local survivors, to artists, doing field trips to local places, inviting local speakers. One approach that was very successful for many decades was to invite Holocaust survivors to school classes, educational meetings, or events to talk about their experiences. Helga Thorsen, who has worked with many Holocaust survivors, is sharing her opinions on that.
One of the most effective methods over time has been inviting Holocaust survivors to speak and to interact with students directly in the classroom. Yet, as Holocaust survivors come to the end of their lives, there will soon no longer be any living memory of the Holocaust, which means that these types of student interactions will no longer be possible in the same way in the near future.
Another approach towards learning about the Holocaust can be found in experiential learning, where we talk about learning through experience by allowing learners to take an active part in their learning experience about the Holocaust. So that means that people would engage with topics about the Holocaust, memorials, they visit museums, they might talk to a survivor and find ways to reflect on that and discuss what that means to them and what they can learn from that. So the centering of active engagement and experiences is an important approach. This is also very central to different methods of place-based learnings. That means offering opportunities to students, but to adults, to different groups of people to visit sites where history took place. So we would go to sites of atrocities, to memorials, and visit those sites and learn about the place from local experts, but also discuss the environment of that, the place where that stands, and also how they're embedded in a memorial landscape, in national memory politics, in national identity building, and how they also might be sites of conflicting memories, because sometimes we find groups who are to whom a memorial is very important, by others oppose the same memorial. So going to a place where history actually happened, where the Holocaust happened, where atrocities happened, is a completely different approach to learning than in a classroom. Helga Thorsen has organized the Eyewitness Field School for the University of Victoria for many years, and shares some of her insights.
In 2021, for example, I created and developed the Eyewitness Holocaust Field School, which focuses on Holocaust memorialization in 3 to 4 different countries in Europe. This field school concentrates not only on the past, but also how the past is memorialized in the present, and perhaps memorialized differently in different locations. In this way, students build a personal connection to the memorialization process, gaining a greater awareness to both the past and the present as they think about the future.
One last approach I want to mention in this podcast is arts-based learning about the Holocaust. The University of Victoria has a wonderful project on arts-based learning and Holocaust education, where graphic novel artists are working together with Holocaust survivors on developing together a graphic novel that is telling the stories of the survivors. And this is such a fascinating project, on one hand, because it allows students to learn with a very different material, with a graphic novel that is for many younger learners more interesting than text-heavy learning material. And it also allows for very different layers in one material. So graphic novels are able to show not only the history of a survivor, but also the process of talking about the past between the artist and the survivor, and also reflect on how they see their own past and their own history in today's world, how it's discussed in their families, in their environment, in the world around them. So this allows for so many ways of using that in educational settings. And I think it is extremely important to think, as we have less and less survivors who are able to tell their stories, to find these kind of new approaches that are interesting to new generations to learn about the Holocaust. The first outcome of this project is the graphic novel anthology of 3 survivor stories. It's called But I Live. And the whole project is led by Professor Charlotte Challier, who is a professor of Germanic Studies at the University of Victoria. So we are coming to an end of our podcast. Thank you all very much for listening. I hope you have learned a thing or two about how Holocaust education and memory politics are interlinked, and maybe you found 1 or 2 ideas and for new approaches towards teaching and learning about the Holocaust. I hope you find the time to listen to our other podcasts. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.